siren! It should be known by those who've been following this channel for the past year or so how excited I am for this game. Ever since that PS5 reveal stream on June the 11th of last year, this was the game that has stood out to me. It was a number of things. Mainly, it's an action game. You show me cool upgradable moves and dodge rolling to get around enemies and you've got my attention. Then it was these little creatures that were following this Kana girl around. We later found out that they're called the Rot, but early on this gave me major Pikmin vibes, which seems like a really interesting combination of styles and mechanics. Then finally was the art style. This one doesn't need explanation. This game looks gorgeous, like a Pixar or Studio Ghibli inspired CG movie. It had me hook, line, and sinker by this point. Yeah, there were the heavy hitters like Miles Morales and Demon Souls, but Kana was the driving force for me to find a PS5. I've been stressing to get one so I can play my most anticipated game of this year, and I'll be damned if I give a penny to scalpers that have been taking advantage of Sony's lack of stock. Not helping the matter was the constant tweeting from Ember Lab's Twitter account, teasing new features and elaborating on things in the game. It just had my attention every time I scrolled by it. The months went on, and then on February 25th of this year, we were given a release date at the end of this new trailer, as well as the announcement that the game would be coming to PC via the Epic Games Store. And hey, when you're balling on a budget like me, you have to avoid spending $400 whenever you can. So I did something that I never do. I pre-ordered the game on that very day for PC. I'm usually so against giving money to something that's not even finished yet, but as you can see from this little history lesson I've taken you on, I have very high hopes for this game. I mean, I planned on buying it anyway, might as well get the hard part out of the way now, and I'm also okay with doing this because the developers Ember Lab are making their video game debut with Kana. Before this, they seemed to only be an animation house with several credits to their name, all great looking stuff if their portfolio is anything to go by, and they were even responsible for that cool Majora's Mask animation a few years back. But now, they're making a video game. I couldn't help but be extremely curious as to how they would handle this transition, and I'm beyond excited to find out for myself. Seeing as how this is a fairly recent title, I'll say it again, be wary of story and gameplay spoilers in this video because I'm not holding anything back here. This is Kana, Bridge of Spirits. Alright, before we begin anywhere, I think I should put my cards on the table. I just finished this game and I give it my highest recommendation possible. If this game doesn't win awards for at least graphical achievement this year, something is wrong. So I'll say it one last time before we get started. Go out and buy this game and play it because it's a masterpiece! Anyway, now we can begin proper. Kana Bridge of Spirits has been quickly compared to a lot of different games as of its release last week. The Legend of Zelda, Dark Souls, Fallen Order, etc. And while these aren't necessarily untrue, they can't help but rub me the wrong way a bit. None of them are technically wrong, but Kana goes so much deeper than any surface level Souls-like comparisons. But throughout my whole playthrough, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was alone in seeing one particular inspiration. To me, this game is the embodiment of old school Rare. A whimsical current gen collectathon where you're to gather everything you can see to unlock more areas to do it all over again and procure upgrades as you go along your journey. Some of my favorite childhood games were seemingly staring back at me the whole time I was exploring this gorgeous world. Now, face value comparisons like the ones I mentioned are good for giving an initial audience a generalized idea of what the game in question is like, but for our purposes today, we need to dig a little deeper, and I can't think of a better way to begin than with the visuals, because my god, this game looks incredible! Being a studio that primarily does animation no doubt had an impact on how the team tackled visuals. Everything in this game, big and small, was paid attention to. The masterful use of light sources to cast the desired atmosphere over a scene, volumetric fob helps to lend a big presence to some areas, in-game dialogue exchanges have lip sync that's on par with the actual cutscenes. Speaking of, each and every character are sculpted with detail but are also workable. They're all covered in small distinguishable details that do a great job job of breathing subtle characteristics into the cast. And models are squashed and stretched all the time, demonstrating unparalleled fluidity of motion. That's in and out of cinematics, I might add. At times you really do feel like you're controlling a Pixar film with how these characters bounce through these colorful environments. And that's one of the main reasons I spent so much time in photo mode. I was stopping the action more than a little brother who thinks they did something cool in Melee. But if I had to ask for something, it would be control over particle effects like Ghost of Tsushima allowed you to do. But that's not to diminish what already is here, because it's amazing. The visuals as a whole just speak volumes on their own. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you that. But where I do want to try and dig my teeth a little more is the game itself. Kana's combat is all about giving you new tools to play with and asking you to put them all to good use. You seriously continue to get new weapons and abilities up until the last hour or so of playtime. Kana's trusty staff is where the gist of your abilities will be coming from. She has a basic string of light attacks and a basic string of heavy attacks as well. After getting some upgrades, you can unlock things like a sprinting light and heavy attack, and a stronger heavy attack if you can time it just right. She can roll out of the way of oncoming danger, perform a double jump, and use this shield to block attacks, which can also be timed just right for a parry and counter attack. Oh yeah, baby, that's my... But this is where Kana's physical abilities come to a halt. Instead, her spirit-based attacks pick up the rest of the slack from here. She'll gain the ability to shoot arrow-like projectiles, create a bomb that can be detonated from a distance, and dash a moderate distance in the blink of an eye for some speedy maneuvers. But it gets even better. That's where these little guys come in. These adorable little devils are the Rot. They help to solve puzzles around the world, but most importantly, they beef up Kana's spirit attacks. She can send a blast of them at an enemy with her staff, power up an arrow to pierce through a straight line of enemies, have them restrain an enemy, and then distribute any arrow damage to nearby enemies, which seriously is so much fun. And then, she can use them in a bomb to freeze anything and everything caught in the blast, leaving them absolutely helpless for a short time. All of these abilities feel great to fire off and utilize, but I believe the one thing that gives all of these tools purpose is the intimidating and varied enemy cast. In the ideal action game, every enemy is designed to have a weakness somewhere in the player's arsenal. There are always multiple ways to beat the enemy, but one way that's the most effective. Luckily, Ember Lab has that philosophy posted on the damn door. Of course you have your basic enemies that just run around and swing a weapon at you, but they can be taken out by simply doing the same thing. There are shield enemies that have to be smashed with a heavy attack before they can be damaged. We got the basic and only flying enemy that can be taken out with a good charged arrow. You've got these rock guys that have to have their weak spot exposed by a bomb. There are the grounded ranged fighters that can be taken out with one well-placed arrow thanks to the weak point in their chest. Then there are several more intimidating melee-focused enemies. You have to use a more defensive approach with a lot of these guys because they can really hurt you. They have pretty readable attacks, so they can be countered or dodged, but that doesn't mean they're easy to take down. You can shave off a considerable amount of health by targeting these weak spots on their bodies, which also drop the energy needed to perform rot attacks. One of my personal favorites are these intangible guys that can't be damaged by any attacks at the start of the fight. For the longest time, I thought you had to parry one of their attacks to make them vulnerable, but it turns out you can use the dash to take them down a peg too. But that's just one more reason why the combat designers should be praised here. I could go on and on about how amazing every last boss battle was, but I don't want to spoil them all for you guys, and I also don't think you'd want to hear me go on about how literally every single boss was crushingly brutal, but never for a second did they feel unfair, or how there was always a strategy to find in these encounters, but the game always wants you to work for it. It'd bore you to sleep hearing me gush about how these bosses have ways for Kana to counter their super attacks, but they're never telegraphed in a super obvious way, but it also never felt super cryptic to just stumble upon by trying stuff, and you definitely wouldn't find it interesting to see how graphically realized these climactic encounters are while staying at an impressively consistent 60 frames per second. Yeah, no, I won't bother you with any of that. All joking aside, combat was more than I could have ever hoped for, if I'm being honest. I wasn't expecting it to just snowball as much as it did. After every new power or weapon, I kept saying to myself, alright, that has to be it. But then I would get another fun toy to play with. There were some slight hiccups though, like the lock-on can be a little finicky. I encountered several occasions where it would break in the middle of a tough battle and left me a little blind. I would be looking at something that was in the opposite direction of the enemy, but they were still in the middle of a lengthy combo with plenty of tracking. It was at its worst in this boss fight, when after teleporting away, the camera would lock on the boss's last position, even while nothing was right there. Meanwhile, the boss can just teleport around the arena and kill me. Sometimes the enemy AI would just bug out. We seem to have a problem with the enemy projectiles not being telegraphed at all when they're off screen. Out of sight enemies in general just need some sort of check to make sure they don't blindside the player out of nowhere. But my thing with all these small missteps is that they're so small. They're all problems that can be easily fixed in a patch update. The combat that is here though is stellar. I played through on the hardest difficulty available and felt that it was perfect for displaying how demanding but fair Kena is. There are plenty of small things to make the combat so much fun to dig into, like how Kena's aerial control seems to increase when aiming in the air, making it ideal for moving around enemies if you can short hop into a bow draw. That timed heavy attack I mentioned ends up staggering enemies and even bosses a lot of the time. It kinda trivialized some fights if I could keep it up, but I would be lying if I was to say I didn't like having some minor exploits like this. It's not on the same level as a more combo-driven action game, sure, but it was just meaty enough for me to enjoy the hell out of it. Coming in and firing off your last ability to finish a tough boss never fails to give me that feeling of satisfaction. And I'm so eager to test my mettle against that even harder difficulty now that I've unlocked it. But what about the other half of the gameplay, the part that completely took me by surprise? Some of what ended up being the best 3D platforming I've experienced since Super Mario Odyssey in 2017. Platforming is a difficult thing to articulate your feelings on, huh? Like I mentioned, I grew up with the likes of Rare's Golden Age platformers like Banjo, and I think those games have spectacular platforming within them. I really get excited when there are split-second jumps to be made, even better when they're under a time limit, and thankfully, Kena has this in spades. There are plenty of tight jumps that require strict timing, as well as plenty of small consecutive jumps. And just another reason why this game was made specifically for me, after you get the bow ability, you'll start coming across these flowers that open up when you're in a specific spot in front of them, and when they're shot, they...
Sheesh, that look bussin' on God, respectfully. Oh, that's my boy.
These grapple flowers are such a little fun mechanic to master, and paired with that slowdown that occurs when you draw the bow in the air, it doesn't stop being a hoot and a half. The bombs are able to activate specific debris which float in the air for a short amount of time. These were my favorite, and that's for a couple of reasons. The way the activation is animated looks great. I love the pressure you feel to get across in time. These crystals, oh man, the debris rotates when shot with an arrow, and it makes for some of the best quick thinking in the game. It's just so airtight in its execution, and the sound design should be complimented again here because it never gets old. These gates come in a little later, but can be used to warp to another gate if you dash through them. I feel like I'm starting to repeat myself, but it just comes together so nicely. The satisfaction that comes with purifying these areas is crazy cool. The sweep of foliage that takes back the land is worth the reward on its own, but there are also tons of little trinkets to find and go after, with the rot being the most valuable things to find because they can make you more formidable in combat, but they can also be glamorized. Eat your hearts out, Nintendo. These dudes can carry things around and even attack enemies, but unlike some little color-coded creatures I know, the rot can wear hats. Not a poncho in sight, hats. These are the new top tier collectible. Sorry, Respawn. No sarcasm here, I actually love these things. When I learned I could put a stack of pancakes on my little guys' heads, it's all I wanted. But there are also several really cool accessories you can get for your little army, and a touch I find particularly brilliant is that the currency used to buy the Rot's drip is completely separate from the currency used to buy new upgrades. I do have to admit, there is one place where I feel like Kena falls a little short, and that's with its narrative. The three main spirits you help actually have fairly well realized stories, to be completely fair. I think Tyro, Adira, and Toshi all have believable stories to experience, and they resolve in predictable yet heartwarming ways. They're all interesting dissections on what love can do if never given the chance to be expressed. However, our protagonist raised far more questions than she cared to answer. Mainly, her father. Kena talks about her father any chance she gets, revealing that he was a spirit guide and that they even had differing ideals and ways of going about the job.
My father was a spirit guide. Our traditions are different, but he helped many spirits pass from this life to the next.
But that's never elaborated on. The seeds are planted for some major revelation to happen for Kana as a character, but it never does. And then secondly, and I could have missed something, but Kana seemed to be worried about the spirit energy in her body at the beginning of the game. It's very easy to see this, but it never comes up again to my knowledge. We see the energy in her body is still there and focused on in cutscenes toward the end of the game, but the troublesome side of things seems like something that was either forgotten or maybe left on the cutting room floor. Not a big deal, but something I couldn't help but notice. As we wrap up here, it shouldn't go unmentioned, but I did have the puzzle at the water shrine crash my game twice, and my game froze right here for unknown reasons. But even with all these small complaints, you should have picked up by this point that none of this even came close to ruining my experience with this amazing game. There might be things that are similar to other games present here, but that speaks nothing to the amount of passion that seeps through every corner of this project. From the combat that kept me consistently engaged in strategizing, the razor-sharp platforming, and meaningful collectibles that made this world worth meticulously combing through. The sound design that hits you like a truck when it needs to and stimulates the brain everywhere else. And oh my god, the soundtrack! It's nothing super catchy or the kind of thing that you would really bop your head to, but instead a mystical score that permeates the whole game and fits every situation like a key. From the cheery bounce of the village to the loud bombastic boss battles, it was never out of place and gave me the goosies on quite a few occasions. I'm incredibly glad that Ember Lab's first foray into the realm of games has been this successful. I really hope they continue to be a big contender in this industry. I want to see what else this studio can accomplish if they give it another real shot. And from the looks of it, they aren't done supporting Kana just yet, so that's exciting. And hey, I've got a whole new difficulty to keep me busy until then. So if for some reason you haven't, go buy this game and play it. It deserves your time and money more than any game I can imagine right now. But anyway, I appreciate you for watching. So thanks for stopping by and have a great day.